Welcome back. The British Airways owner IAG says demand for air travel is unlikely to fully recover before 2023 after it posted further significant financial losses. IAG, which also owns Iberia, Aer Lingus and Vueling, said its total operating loss in the 3 months to the end of September was £1.7 billion. Japan Airlines and Air France KLM have also posted major losses this year. So how long can the world's biggest airlines actually survive? Joining us now from central London is the aviation industry analyst, Sally Gethin. Sally, good to speak to you. When we look at British Airways alone, I think, 9 months to the end of the year, almost £6 billion of losses. I mean, how long can it actually go on for before these numerous different airlines start shutting their doors?
Well, Tom, if you look at the example of IAG, they do have access to incredible amounts of cash, liquidity we call it. And so we're talking in the region of about 6.6 billion euros to take it forward. And if we look at how much it's hemorrhaged already this year, that shows that they can survive for a couple more years going forward, which sounds incredible. And this really is a good example of what's happening across the industry, that it's the large network carriers, the large groups, the large airlines like IAG, British Airways, Lufthansa, the Lufthansa Group. They've all got greater access to cash and money. They're being bailed out by governments. Some of them are being renationalised to a large extent, like Lufthansa. And so they have this advantage going forward. But it's the other airlines, the low-cost carriers we all rely on here in Europe, for example, Ryanair, EasyJet. Some of them are having a much harder time, and it really depends on their efficiencies and how aggressive and how quickly they can adapt to this fast-changing market.
OK, well, let's dive into a little bit of that. So on the liquidity issue for the smaller airlines, do any of them have any pot? Or are they operating almost on a month-to-month basis, and this has completely thrown them out of whack?
Well, to give you an idea, the airline industry body is forecasting that revenues will drop by 60-odd% next year. They've already hemorrhaged $84 billion, and the average airline has about 8.5 months to survive on cash reserves. So what we saw earlier this year in the summer was a bit of a rebound, and they were adapting to that. But obviously with the second wave and these erratic travel restrictions and no end in sight in terms of COVID testing across the air industry as a whole, they're being hampered. So it's really each one for themselves. I mean, Ryanair is very good, very nimble and adaptable, but other airlines aren't. And we're seeing quite a number of casualties. So, for example, there are about 20 airline failures over the whole of 2020 since this pandemic hit. About half of those are in administration. In other words, finding ways to survive. But we are bound to see more and more of these as time goes on, and we're all on the back foot with pandemic.
You mentioned the big reserves that the big airlines have and the fact that some of them have indeed been bailed out by governments. Does the focus for governments, therefore, if they wish to try and keep some of the smaller airlines afloat, need to switch to potentially financially supporting just the smaller ones through this crisis and leave the bigger ones that have that big pot of cash to potentially sink or swim over the next 2 years?
So you've identified an imbalance there, and you're absolutely right. The airlines with that access to capital, why should they cling on to it more? It's likely they will get more bailouts, actually more state aid. However, the smaller airlines, they're actually not all in agreement, in consensus about this. Not all of them expect or want to go for state aid, which often comes with strings attached. And also they have to pay back that money. A lot of it is aid which comes with a lot of terms and conditions attached to it. Low-cost carriers in particular are used to operating on thin margins anyway. So some, yes, would like that support, but others not always. So, for example, Ryanair, again, is not particularly in favour of state aid at all. What a lot of them want to see is just state aid as a solution to be reduced as a whole across the sector, and to create a more level playing field.
Sally Gethin, good to speak to you. Thanks for taking the time today.
Thank you.
Let's have a